Hi, welcome to another episode of Coffee with Alissa. Today we'll continue our estate planning conversation by talking about beneficiary designations. Greg Daly, a senior wealth manager on our team, will be joining me to discuss this very important and often forgotten topic. How are you today, Greg?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Alissa.
Thanks for talking with me about this.
Happy to do it.
So oftentimes people may think that their will or their trust covers the distributions of all of their assets at their passing. So which types of accounts have their own beneficiary designations and don't fall under those traditional estate planning documents?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the two most common things really that almost anybody might have would be life insurance for one, and retirement accounts, whether those be IRAs or Roths or 401ks, company retirement plans, any kind of qualified money. So those things allow you to name who you want directly to inherit funds from there. And it could be multiple people. It doesn't have to be one person. But in doing so, that bypasses the will and probate and everything else. So that's really like on the Monopoly board, right? Like, pass go and collect 200. Those beneficiary designations send you right past the rigmarole of the estate process. So there's some real benefits there to having money go directly to the people who you want to inherit it.
And there are some non-traditional beneficiary options for certain accounts as well. Can you talk a little bit about payable on death and transfer on death designations, and then like which accounts they apply to?
Yeah, I think oftentimes you'll see people that, they may have a bank account or a personal investment account that doesn't fit under IRA rules. And one of the things that people can do there as an option is to name somebody as a transfer on death or payable on death on beneficiary. And in a way, you're making that account be the same way that an IRA would be. You're saying, okay, rather than this go through the will and probate and the executor is going to figure out who gets what, you're saying very specifically in a document with the account custodian who should get those funds, and those funds will go directly to that person. One of the things you have to look out for in that situation is if you pass away and you've got everything titled with a beneficiary or transfer or payable on death, you need to make sure that your estate has enough money actually in your estate to pay costs, right? If something happens to you, you've got all of your final bills. There'll be a final tax return that has to be filed on your behalf to take care of everything. So you need money to make those things happen. And if everything is passed directly to beneficiaries, the executor might find himself in the uncomfortable position of having to go back to the beneficiaries and clawing money back into the estate to pay off the bills and submit the final tax return. It's not a great position to be in. So it requires a little bit of advanced planning. If you want to name beneficiaries on the non-IRAs and non-life insurance, you can. Just be careful to not sort of overdo it in the sense that you leave the executor having to scratch for funds to settle things when you're gone.
Very good point. We have seen that before. So,
Yeah.
So how often should people revisit their beneficiary designations, and are there triggering events that they should be aware of?
Sure. So I think any major life event, right? Marriage, divorce, change in status with children, when children go from minors to being adults, when you're planning for your retirement, all those things can be opportunities to kind of go back and take a look at beneficiary designations. I think there's kind of two main things that come to mind when you ask that question. One is it is not uncommon for people to get divorced and forget to go back and change the designations on life insurance and retirement accounts in particular. And I have seen firsthand where people have not looked at beneficiaries in 20 years and an ex-spouse or somebody else is on there, and that counts. If you forgot to change your beneficiaries, that's not a good reason for the custodian or the life insurance policy to go against what your designation is and do something else. So you have to be really careful when you're naming these beneficiaries, right? So you want to make sure that you're real specific with the information. Do you have the name right? Do you have the birth date right? Do you have the social security right? If there's a senior and a junior in the same family, make sure you're designating between the two. And I think the other, kind of key point is when you're leaving money to minors, right? And a lot of people will do this. They'll say, I'll just leave it to my kids, and my Aunt Sophie or my sister Jean will take care of them. you have to specify how you want that to happen. You have to remember, children can't own things outright. They can't inherit IRA assets outright. While they're still minors, there has to be a custodian or a guardian that essentially controls those monies for them. So you either have to specify that in your will if you name a minor as a beneficiary on an account, or you would create a trust in your estate plan, direct those funds to the trust for the benefit of that minor until they hit the age of maturity and could own those funds outright. There's a lot more to it than that. We can get really into it if you want. Maybe that'll be the subject of a future call. But I think for now that probably at least is enough food for thought for everybody to, hey, listen, if they're under 18, you really need to consider who's going to control that money for them and how you're going to specify that, whether it's going to be through a trust or you're going to name a custodian or a guardian for that person in your will. Because if you don't do that, probate court will do that for you. And it's better if you do it than when the court does it.
Definitely. And you already actually kind of answered my next question about, scenarios where people have forgotten to update beneficiaries, like a divorce or a death, and assets have transferred to somebody that the decedent really didn't intend for them to go to. And we've, certainly seen that or heard stories about that. And, it's definitely not ideal. So very important, like Greg said, he gave some really good triggering events in life where you should be thinking about updating those beneficiaries on life insurance and retirement accounts. So really appreciate you joining me today. And we really appreciate all of those watching, and we'll see you next month.
All right. Anytime. Thank you, Alissa.